May the Lord completely bless your day today and give you an upcoming week that is simply filled with peace, clear guidance, and a profound sense of purpose in whatever you do.
Yes, absolutely.
So imagine living in a society where just sitting on your own bed could get you temporarily exiled from your entire community.
Right, just your normal bed.
Yeah. Or, where a completely normal, completely healthy biological function could actually put you in mortal danger. Like if you accidentally walk too close to the center of your own neighborhood.
Which sounds completely wild to us today.
It really does. But we are so glad you are joining us for this deep dive today because our mission is to unpack a text that, well, it forces us to confront that exact reality. We are looking at Leviticus chapter 15.
Oh yeah, the chapter everyone likes to skip.
Exactly. And we'll be viewing this ancient text through the translation notes and the commentary of two really highly respected scholarly sources. So we're using the Holman Study Bible and the NAA, which is the Nova Almeida Actualizada Study Bible.
And, it is a text that frequently leaves modern readers either just incredibly uncomfortable or, honestly, completely baffled.
Yeah, baffled is a good word for it.
Because of the sheer volume of rules regarding bodily fluids, touching everyday objects, and these really intense washing rituals.
Right. And the NAA notes actually point out a major translation hazard right out of the gate. And I feel like we have to navigate this before we can even begin to understand these ancient regulations.
Oh, definitely. The terminology is so tricky.
Right, because the English word impure, it carries this immense amount of moral baggage for us today. Like, a modern reader sees that word and instantly translates it to, sinner or someone who is morally compromised.
But the Hebrew concept we're dealing with here is purely about ritual status. It's not about a moral failing at all.
Wait, really? So it has nothing to do with sin?
No, not at all. The NAA study notes emphasize that impure in the context of Leviticus is emphatically not the same as being a sinner. Or, since the NAA is a Portuguese resource, they point out it's not the same as a pecador.
Okay, that makes a lot more sense.
Yeah, the biblical worldview does not treat natural bodily reproductive functions as inherently evil. Like, they are recognized as fundamental parts of a good original creation.
Which, that raises an immediate tension, right? If the creation is fundamentally good, why on earth does a normal biological function trigger a quarantine?
Right. It seems contradictory. But the NAA notes provide this really helpful theological framework for it. They explain that while the creation itself is good, human nature and the physical world were severely damaged by Adam's fall.
Oh, I see.
So what we are witnessing in Leviticus 15 is the Creator essentially exercising the sovereign right to dictate the specific terms of how his creatures must approach him.
So it's about the rules of engagement.
Exactly.
Yeah.
This is entirely about what is permitted in the direct presence of the divine.
So if I'm understanding this, it's less like a moral stain on your soul, and it's more like stepping into a sterilized clean room.
That is a perfect way to put it.
Like, if you bring outside microbes into a microchip manufacturing plant, you aren't an evil person.
Right, you haven't committed a crime.
But you are an existential threat to that highly controlled environment. You have to be decontaminated. So being ritually impure just meant you were temporarily restricted from the presence of the sanctuary. It didn't mean you were morally condemned.
Yes, and viewing it through that lens, it completely changes how we read the chapter. And the text itself, it's not just this random, chaotic list of biological rules either.
Yeah, the structure is actually amazing.
It really is. The NAA notes highlight this brilliant architectural structure of Leviticus 15. It's perfectly symmetrical.
Symmetrical how?
Well, it's divided into 4 specific quadrants. So you have a severe or chronic male issue, then a normal male issue, a normal female issue, and finally a severe or chronic female issue.
Wow, so it covers everything in this perfectly balanced way. Let's actually examine the mechanics of that first quadrant. The text describes a man having a discharge from his flesh. And the Holman Bible notes clarify that the word flesh here is basically functioning as a euphemism for male genitalia. And they say this specific condition likely refers to a severe chronic infection.
Yeah, and the ancient text spends a significant amount of time detailing the aggressive contagion effect of this specific infection. Like, the ritual impurity is highly transmissible.
So like an outbreak.
Pretty much. The expanding web of quarantine doesn't just stop at the man himself. It transfers to whatever he sits on, whatever he lies on, and honestly, anyone who touches those objects.
And the physical mechanics of how they dealt with contaminated objects are fascinating to me. Like, The rules dictate that if the impure man touches a clay vessel, that vessel must be shattered.
Yeah, completely destroyed.
But if he touches a wooden vessel, it only needs to be washed with water. Why the difference?
Well, that distinction reveals a lot about the ancient understanding of materials.
Huh.
Clay pottery is porous, right?
Right.
So it absorbs whatever it comes into contact with, making it permanently contaminated in a ritual sense. But wood is solid, so it can be thoroughly rinsed.
That is so practical.
It is. But the text introduces another highly specific, really visceral detail regarding how this impurity spreads that goes way beyond just accidental physical contact.
Oh, you mean the rule regarding spitting?
Yes.
Yeah, the text explicitly states that if this chronically impure man spits on someone who is clean, that clean person instantly becomes ritually impure.
And the Holman note provides some vital cultural context for this interaction. Because in the ancient Near East, spitting wasn't merely, a careless bodily function.
Just clearing your throat.
Exactly. It was a universally recognized gesture of extreme contempt.
Wow.
So this rule points to a deeper layer of the law.
Oh.
It indicates that we aren't just dealing with the external physical reality of the infection here, but potentially the impious heart of the man.
So if he's doing it on purpose...
Yeah, if he is carelessly or maliciously spitting on others, he is essentially weaponizing his impurity.
He is showing absolute contempt for the community and for the sanctuary itself. Okay, so that covers the abnormal severe infection, but then the text applies this exact same quarantine logic to normal seminal emissions. And here's where it gets really interesting, I think.
It really does.
Because we have to pause and look at the surrounding world to understand this. God instituted this temporary impurity to completely and intentionally separate human sexuality from sanctuary ritual.
Right. If we zoom out and look at the broader landscape of the ancient Near East, the Israelites were completely surrounded by Canaanite and Babylonian religions. And those religions featured these deeply entrenched fertility cults.
Right, where sex was basically part of the worship service.
Yes, exactly. A central component of their worship involved humans literally imitating the gods through sexual acts right within the temple precincts.
It was essentially sympathetic magic. Like, the underlying belief was that if the worshippers performed these acts on earth, they could stimulate or sort of manipulate the deities into providing rain and fertile crops.
Which was everything to them.
Yeah, for an ancient farmer whose very survival depended on the next rainfall, participating in temple prostitution wasn't just, lust. It was this anxious, desperate attempt to control the forces of nature.
And that's why this rule in Leviticus is so revolutionary. By declaring that any sexual emission rendered a person ritually impure and unfit for the sanctuary, Israel's God drew a massive, uncompromising line in the sand.
Right.
He ensured that sex, a completely good, healthy, and even mandated part of human life, could never be utilized as a tool for temple worship.
I mean, just imagine the psychological shift that required for an ancient Israelite.
It would be huge.
God is effectively stripping sex of its magical manipulative power. He's telling them, you cannot control the rain by performing rituals in my temple. I am not like the gods of your neighbors.
It demystified human biology.
Completely. And it completely removed it from the realm of the divine sanctuary.
Yeah. And applying that exact same logic, this idea of life fluids representing profound power, the symmetric structure of the chapter moves to the female experience next.
So the text addresses normal female menstruation. And the Holman source notes point out that making a woman, quote-unquote, separate or ritually impure during her period was actually a widely shared concept in the ancient Near East.
It wasn't unique to Israel.
Right. Both the Egyptians and the Persians considered menstruation to be a cultural impurity. So the Israelites would have readily understood the baseline concept.
Yeah, the underlying symbolism across all these ancient cultures was that the loss of bodily fluids, that's specifically blood, which universally represented life, symbolically moved a person closer to the realm of death.
Ah, I see.
So this temporary proximity to mortality is what made them unfit to stand in the direct presence of the author of life.
Okay, so when I was looking through the NLA notes regarding this section, I actually hit a massive wall.
Oh, really?
Yeah. There is what looks like a glaring legal contradiction in the text. So Leviticus chapter 15 states very clearly that if a man lies with a menstruating woman, he simply becomes ritually impure for 7 days.
Okay, right.
But if you turn just a few pages over to Leviticus chapter 18, and then again in chapter 20, the penalty for that exact same act is infinitely more severe. It dictates that they are to be completely eliminated or cut off from the people of Israel.
It's a huge jump.
It is. I was thinking, how do we harmonize this? Did the author just suddenly forget what they wrote 3 chapters earlier? Did the rules just change?
It absolutely looks like a plot hole until you analyze the legal context surrounding those specific chapters.
Okay, so what's the context?
The NWA provides the harmonization here, and it hinges entirely on intention and circumstance. So Leviticus 15 is situated within a broader section that's detailing daily, unavoidable ritual purity.
Just everyday life stuff.
Right. It is legislating an inadvertent, unexpected situation, an implication that arises accidentally during an otherwise lawful interaction between a husband and wife.
Oh, it is the ancient equivalent of the difference between accidental manslaughter and premeditated murder.
That is a brilliant comparison.
Because the physical action might look identical on paper, but the intent behind it completely transforms the legal outcome.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Chapters 18 and 20 are situated in the section dealing with severe moral violations, deliberate rebellion, and specifically adopting the practices of the Canaanites.
So it's willful.
Yes, they address a willful, premeditated breaking of the law in direct defiance of God's boundaries. Circumstances and intent matter immensely to the Creator. This isn't just a blind, robotic application of code.
That nuance is so crucial, and, it leads directly into how the ancient Israelites actually resolved these periods of impurity. Because being impure wasn't a permanent exile.
No, not at all.
The text outlines a very specific process for restoration, particularly for the severe chronic cases we discussed earlier.
And the outline for that purification is highly deliberate. First, the person must wait 7 full days after the abnormal flow has completely stopped.
Just to verify the healing.
Right. Then, they must wash their clothes and bathe their entire body in running water, or what the Hebrew text actually calls living water.
Living water. Finding that in an arid desert environment is no small task.
Definitely not.
I mean, they couldn't just use a stagnant pool or a bucket of water they had stored in their tent. It required actually seeking out a flowing stream or an active spring. And the symbolism there is just striking. They had to use an active, moving source of life to counteract the impurity that symbolized death.
Yeah, the imagery is powerful. And following that immersion on the 8th day, they were required to bring 2 birds, specifically turtle doves or pigeons, to the priest at the tent of meeting.
Right.
And the Holman notes break down the distinct theological functions of these 2 specific offerings.
I found this fascinating because they aren't just bringing 2 birds for a single purpose. They actually do 2 entirely different things.
Exactly. One bird is designated for a sin offering, which acts as expiation, and the other bird is for a burnt offering, a holocaust.
Okay, break that down for us.
So the sin offering explicitly addresses the ritual status. It essentially wipes the slate clean and formally removes the impurity.
But removing the negative status isn't enough on its own, right?
No, it's not. The burnt offering, where the entire animal is consumed and the smoke rises upward, well, that represents total dedication to God.
Ah, I see.
This second sacrifice is what officially restores the person back into the communal and spiritual life of Israel. So one sacrifice decontaminates the individual, and the other reestablishes the positive relationship.
And the choice of animals here speaks volumes about the Creator's intent. Like, doves and pigeons were the absolute least expensive animals to sacrifice in the ancient world.
They were the poor man's sacrifice.
Yeah. If the law had required, say, a bull or a sheep for purification, a chronic infection could financially ruin a poor family. It would effectively exile them from God's presence forever, simply because they couldn't afford the cure.
Which would be tragic.
But the system was meticulously designed for grace and restoration, ensuring that poverty was never a barrier to returning to the community.
That's a beautiful way to look at it. And, all of these meticulously detailed procedures, the shattering of clay pots, the living water, the 2 birds, it all builds up to a singular, vital warning at the very end of the chapter.
Right, verse 31.
Yes. Verse 31 reveals the ultimate stakes of this entire system.
And what blows my mind is how blunt verse 31 is. I mean, the text flat out states that the Israelites had to be separated from their impurities so that they would not die by defiling God's tabernacle, which dwelled right there in the middle of their camp.
It's very direct.
Why does all this matter so much? Like, how do we reconcile the concept of a loving creator with this kind of lethal proximity?
Well, the Holman note unpacks a really profound linguistic detail in that verse to help us understand. The Hebrew root word used for separate here is the exact same root used for the word Nazarite.
Wait, like Samson?
Exactly like Samson.
The individuals who took extreme vows of holiness, like refusing to cut their hair or drink wine.
Yes. So using that root implies a state of absolute intentional abstinence and extreme vigilance. The Israelites were essentially required to maintain a Nazirite level of awareness regarding their biological realities just to survive the physical presence of the sanctuary.
That is
The
intense.
holiness of God dwelling in the geographic center of their camp was a very real, very potent
It
force.
functions almost exactly like a nuclear reactor in the middle of a modern city.
Oh, that's a great analogy.
Like, the reactor provides incredible life-sustaining power that the entire city depends on to survive, right? The power itself is entirely good,
Yeah, you need it.
but you cannot simply stroll into the reactor core wearing your street clothes with mud on your shoes.
Mm.
If you approach that raw power without being properly shielded and prepared according to strict protocols, that good power becomes instantly lethal. God's presence was the life source of Israel, but it demanded ultimate respect and absolute purity.
And just consider the sheer psychological weight of maintaining that protocol. I mean, we're talking about a desert camp of over 1 million people.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
The tabernacle is right there in the center. And biological realities are happening continuously every single minute of the day.
So an invisible web of impurity is constantly being drawn and redrawn throughout the camp as people just go about their normal lives.
Yes, and the NAA notes point out the inevitable mathematical reality of this setup. Impurities were constantly infecting the camp and threatening the sanctity of the tabernacle.
Because it's unavoidable.
Exactly. No matter how many baths the people took in living water, no matter how many pigeons they faithfully offered, the camp was a factory generating continuous ritual impurity.
It's an entirely unwinnable battle. The tension would just build and build.
Which is exactly why Leviticus 15 is so critical to the broader narrative of the Bible. This entire chapter is anticipating something far greater. It systematically sets the stage, creating this unbearable tension that proves the absolute necessity of a massive, overarching national cleansing.
And it leads directly into the very next chapter, Leviticus 16, the Day of Atonement.
Yom Kippur. Without the relentless, terrifying buildup of impurity detailed in chapter 15, the Day of Atonement just looks like a nice, optional religious festival.
Just a holiday.
Right. But chapter 15 reveals that it was a matter of literal national survival. It was the one day a year the high priest was permitted to enter the most holy place to wipe the entire slate clean for the camp.
Wow. Without that overarching sacrifice, the sheer volume of daily impurities would eventually overwhelm the community, forcing the life-giving presence of God to either depart from the camp entirely or destroy them.
Exactly.
So these ancient texts aren't just archaic medical textbooks or bizarre cultural relics at all. They are masterfully building a theological narrative that demonstrates humanity's desperate, ongoing need for complete cleansing in order to safely dwell with a holy God.
Yes. And engaging deeply with a text like this, it forces a radical realization about our own modern worldview, because we are deeply conditioned to compartmentalize our lives today.
Oh, for sure. We put our physical, biological realities in one tightly sealed box. Like, that is a matter for the doctor, the gym, or our private lives.
Right.
And we put our spiritual lives in a completely separate box. Like, that is for a Sunday morning service or a private prayer time.
But for the ancient Israelites navigating the reality of the tabernacle, there was zero separation. The physical and the spiritual were inextricably, dangerously intertwined.
Yeah.
Every biological function had profound theological implications.
And this forces us to ask a deeply challenging question as we wrap up our time together. Consider how deeply connected your own physical reality is to your spiritual reality. In a modern culture that desperately tries to divorce our physical bodies from our spiritual identity, what does it actually mean to believe in a creator who claims absolute sovereignty over even the most private biological realities of human existence?
It demands that we acknowledge God's authority over the entirety of who we are, not just the sanitized spiritual portions we feel comfortable sharing.
It completely reframes how we view ourselves when we realize there isn't a single square inch of human biology or daily life where the Creator does not say mine. Thank you so much for joining us for this deep dive. God blesses all of you listening. We will catch you next time.